My name is Nick, the EMF Guy Pinot. I'm the host of the 2024 EMF Hazard Summit. Welcome. In this presentation, Brian Hoyer will teach you how to shield your bedroom against the constant stress caused by ambient electropollution, such as the one coming from Wi-Fi routers from neighbors, cell towers, smart meters, you name it. There are thousands of sources, especially inside cities. You'll learn different approaches to shielding your bedroom depending on your budget, common shielding mistakes to avoid making, and how this shielding can help move your body towards recovery, better sleep, and better quality of life. Brian Hoyer is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, certified geobiologist, and widely known EMF mitigation specialist. He is the founder of Shielded Healing, an EMF mitigation company who has done thousands of EMF surveys in the last few years alone, and also the Shielding Shop. Let's dive into this presentation. I'm here today with my longtime colleague and friend, Brian Hoyer from Shielded Healing. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Nick?
I'm doing great, and this is my new setup here. I'm getting blasted by a little bit too much artificial light than you would like, but the image looks good though. So I was a little bit unsure if I should. I have the red light here, so if I do this,
it looks like you're joining us from outer space. Like
if I do this, there's like highlights, but this is the Photon light that you recommend. So you will learn a lot from Brian Hoyer today. We've been doing a lot of different things together, including the EMF Circle. We did a course together, also an EMF protection course. But today I really want to dig into Brian's brain on a topic that I think I'll be surprised about some answers, because we rarely talk specifically about electrosensitivity. Sometimes we touch on it in our membership, but I want to know a little bit about your experience. Maybe tell people the 1-minute version of what you do and what your experience has been doing EMF surveys, because I think it's important to display that you have that kind of experience, and then get into what are the most common complaints or symptoms that make people contact you for your services.
Good questions. So basically, I started off in this delve into health about, really it was when my first daughter was born. And then, over time, I did a lot of research and became very knowledgeable about natural health. And then fast forward to a few years later, I became so knowledgeable that I had a lot of friends asking me questions, and I decided to go ahead and go back to school to become a functional nutritional therapy practitioner. So I did that, and then I started a health practice and was doing, personalized health assessments on people, where I actually would learn all of these reflex points on the body, and you could tell through palpations and on organs and reflex points what nutrients that person needed. So I was kind of customizing solutions for each person's body. And part of the continuing education I did with that was with a very well-known holistic medical doctor in the circles, especially these EMF circles that we run in, Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt. Mm-hmm. And he was pretty much, one of, you could count on one hand the people that were talking about EMF in the early 90s. And he was one of those that's been talking about that for a long time. And so, as I went to this lecture that he had, he said several things that just kind of hit me hard, because as a practitioner, I was working individually with people. And you noticed, like in the 90s, that, growing up in the 90s as a kid and into my teenage years, that the world was changing very rapidly. We started, in the late 90s, it was very common for a high schooler to have a cell phone. And by like 2002, everyone had a cell phone. So it was, that was when I graduated from high school. So, during that time, going into, this lecture, I was working with about 30 to 50 people individually on their health. A lot of young families, young moms with young children. And I was doing gut healing protocols, all of these sorts of things. And one of the things that Dr. Klinghardt said during his lecture is, like, people are not going to get well unless they deal with this electropollution that we have today. And he had a certain protocol that he was implementing with his patients, that he said, if you don't do this, you're not going to get well. And half of his practice is children with autism, people with autoimmune conditions, Lyme disease, chronic Lyme, heart and brain issues, neurological issues, cardiovascular issues, just chronic fatigue, things like that. And there's he's the doctor that people go to when they've already seen 30 doctors and they can't help them.
Yeah.
So I highly respect how he's been able to help so many people and inspire many doctors. He's a mentor to hundreds of doctors all around the world. And, he had this specific protocol that he was doing. And I was looking around at the professionals at the time. This was probably in about 2016. And there was nobody following his recommendations on this is what you need to do. You have to get rid of as much of the electropollution during the day and then create a pristine environment in the evening. And so in 2017, I started Shielded Healing. And as I learned about EMF, I kind of became an expert very rapidly in this, because when I do research, I do deep dives and I figure out what the problem is and then try to come up with solutions for people. And so that's what I was doing with people's individual bodies. And then I was like doing it for their homes and their environment, because ultimately I was working on returning people to an ancestral lifestyle of what they're putting into their body, getting them to eat more ancestrally, more nutrient dense whole foods. And then I was realizing that, you know what, we're not putting these same people that we're putting all these healthy foods into, they don't have a healthy environment to go into. And so the idea was like, we need to start recreating these ancestral environments. And that's what shielded healing was all about. So over the years, I started off by myself doing over 1,000 EMF assessments where I was helping people put in solutions. And probably, 50 the first year, people started shielding their bedroom the way that I really thought it needed to be done. But over the years, we've had hundreds of people now, maybe nearing 1,000, that have shielded their rooms. And really, my company and the way that I've been doing this over the last few years, we're the only ones really actually doing that full protocol and showing people like you can shield your room. And we see these kind of results when we do the shielding. And you only have to do it once, as long as you don't move, and then you have to do it again. But it's something where if you're electrosensitive, you need to have an environment where you can escape to, especially while you're sleeping, so you can heal all the damage that's being done by this non-ionizing radiation during the day. And so through this process, like you asked what kind of people approach us for help. I would say about maybe 70% of people are just biohackers, wellness influencers, people who really care about their health, that want to optimize their health. They know we're living in a toxic soup as far as chemicals and air quality and also EMF. And so they're like, EMF is one of those things I want to take care of. And then about 30% are people who are just chronically ill. They have multiple chemical sensitivity. They're electrosensitive, or they might think something's wrong and they just really, really want to create a healing environment for themselves. And it's debilitating to them. It's totally changed their life. And some of these people are people who, like, just a few years ago, they were on top of the world, like lots of energy, doing their very best work right in the prime of their careers, and then things crash. One of our friends, Daphne Tackover, is one of the people who, that's a classic example. Someone who's electrosensitive. She was around technology all the time, and she started to advocate being very politically active for this, because she was a really a top tier lawyer, and she's worked with people like Robert F. Kennedy and We Are the Evidence and the Children's Health Defense now to actually put litigation towards the telecom industry to get them to redo their standards. And so it's really an important topic to her. But for a lot of these people who are electrosensitive, it's so debilitating, they can't even come out of their house. They feel like they can't do anything. And so when we go to these people's homes, there's all sorts of protocols that we kind of go through. But the main thing is getting their bedroom dialed in. And we can kind of go through this list of, what you need to consider, what you need to do in order to start to actually take that first step forward on your path of healing if you're worried about this electrosensitivity issue, because it is a huge deal.
Sure. And do you find that some of these people who contact you and let's say their health crash, there's something wrong, do they pinpoint that one of the culprits could be EMFs, or in some situations it's almost a shot in the dark and they a last resort and they say, I don't know if this is bothering me? Or do they actually realize that, it's as easy as they take a phone in their hand, they feel the tingle? Does it vary, or do most people actually make that link themselves? Yeah,
good question. It's really a mixed bag. There's some people who know that, like, when they go near a Wi-Fi router, they start to get a headache. There's some people that know, like, when the phone rings, they start to correlate things. Their eye twitches. They have some kind of spasm. And there are things that maybe a normal everyday person that's not experiencing chronic symptoms or painful symptoms, you might have a little twitch or something, and you don't realize that didn't just happen for no reason. Your body's reacting to something in your environment. So it's not just some nervous tick that you have necessarily, or like there's pain that happens. Sometimes it could be a digestive issue. It could be some other kind of nervous system regulation, autonomic response that's going on. But there's a lot of times when you can correlate like electrical impulses, they contract muscles and tissues and cells. And so if you have a pulsating frequency, it makes sense that it can impact your biology to contract and to release different minerals, different types of molecules on a cellular level, and deplete you of many of the nutrients that you're trying to build in your body. And it's no secret that we're nutrient deficient in this country and in the entire world because of our farming practices and other things that we've done to deplete the soil and make nutrients less bioavailable. But it's also the other issue is that we have these bodies that are being exposed to all of this energy and wasting energy by these micro contractions that are happening 24/7. And so as your body is depleted of this energy and these nutrients and these different elements, you're left with kind of an empty battery, so to speak. And not only that, but we know that sunlight is super important for people. That's like the natural EMF that we need to help recharge our mitochondria, our battery. And so a lot of people are living more indoors, and these electrosensitive people tend to live more indoors because they're afraid of the other bad radiation that's detrimental to their health. That's more intense outside when they have line of sight, free range with these radio towers, television towers, and cell phone towers.
Yeah, this is a great point, and I guess it's a delicate balance of going outside to get the natural frequencies. I know with Dr. Jack Cruz on this summit, we talked about the importance of that. But many electrosensitives, I think, lack even the environment at home that is calm enough to help them get better. And this is where you step in with the idea of having a shielded bedroom. Some people are not familiar with that term. What does it mean to shield your bedroom? And then let's go through the different approaches that people can take, because it's an investment, but at the same time for electrosensitives, I know that some doctors like Klinghardt, for example, would surely recommend that to their patients. And these people are chronically ill, and for sure it's an expense, but everything is an expense to try to treat your health. And then also, some people don't want to wait until they have chronic illness to actually, do something about this electropolluted environment.
Right. And to make a case for shielding a room, it's actually pretty easy if you think about it this way. And, your body's number one healing response is at night when you're sleeping. Mm-hmm. You don't start, your body doesn't repair. It starts to use energy when you're digesting your food, and it's just collecting all of those nutrients to rebuild your tissues at night when you're sleeping. But if your body is stressed at night when you're sleeping, then it's not going to do nearly as good of a job. It's not going to be as efficient at rebuilding and repairing because it's perceiving a stressor. And whenever an animal in nature or a human in nature is perceiving a stressor, it does not prioritize detoxification or regeneration. It prioritizes dealing with that stressor. And so you're depleting your nutrients by having a stressor that's just constantly present, bombarding you 24/7. And so the goal really with a shielded room is to stop that and let your body heal in this healing space. And that it basically what it does is it amplifies any current therapy that you're doing, because anything that you're doing, you're trying to do to rebuild your body and repair something that was broken. Well, you can't repair something that was broken if your body's constantly being broken during the repair time. And so blocking out that stress makes a whole lot of sense. And the way that we do that is there's several different options that you can do. I like to kind of view it more as like a bedroom remodel for your health. And there's different types of shielding paints that you can do. They're carbon or graphite based or both. And they're conductive. And so you have an electrician ground those to the equipment grounding conductor, basically that third prong in your outlet. And it creates an entirely grounded space on the floor, the walls, and the ceiling. And there's material that you can put underneath the floors if you don't want to paint the floors or whatever. But it creates a Faraday cage concept in the room. And over the windows, you put a silver and cotton curtain, or there's some window films that you can use that have metallic materials in them. But the idea is that you're connecting everything together, grounding it. You're blocking the electricity that's constantly bombarding you from the walls, and also reflecting away all of the cell phone radiation. And a lot of people don't realize, but in our course, the Electropollution Fix, we talk about how much radio frequency has increased in the last 200 years. Mm-hmm. And that number is 1 quintillion. And now that's one with, is it 17 or 18 zeros?
18 zeros. Yeah, it's mad. It's incredible.
Yeah. So we have this huge influx of this pulsating energy that our bodies have never experienced before. And we're just never getting a rest from that. And it's not only the wireless radiation, it's also things in the house. Because we have electricity, pulsating electricity at 60 hertz or 50 hertz in Europe and other parts of the world. And that is significantly higher than and pulsating like more. And there's all kinds of dirty frequencies that are also riding along that. And so it's a very noxious, like annoying and a painful thing for your body to experience energetically and also just physically all the time. And so if we can just block that out for 8 hours a night, you kind of give your body a chance in this modern toxic soup that we live in, because these frequencies, they pull you out of that parasympathetic state, but they also damage your membranes, your barriers on a cellular level, but also your gut membrane and your blood-brain barrier. There's been a lot of studies that show that just a few seconds of radio frequency exposure will cause a leaky blood-brain barrier. And so that's really important, because not only do we not want a leaky blood-brain barrier, but today it's super important because we're more toxic than ever. And I was listening to a podcast the other day and on this toxicity specialist, and they said that there was a study in 2008 that measured, like, on average, there's about 10 toxins per cell. And in 2008, like 10 different toxins per cell. And then they redid the same test in 2018, and it was 500 different toxins per cell. And that's just an astronomical number. And so, like, the toxicity is only going up, the EMF is only going up, and so we have to take dramatic measures to do something to protect our health. We have to have a detox lifestyle, and we also have to have a protecting, bunkering down lifestyle that respects our human biology.
Yeah, this is especially, I think, profound for electrosensitives, but for everyone, and that's the kind of the goal of this summit, is help the average person that maybe doesn't think they're electrosensitive to identify, well, in reality, I am, because when I turn off my phone or turn off the Wi-Fi at night, I sleep better. So right there, you have different degrees of sensitivity. Some people could get a headache when talking on the phone, and maybe their wife or their friend does not, but it doesn't mean they're not electrosensitive to a degree or another. In fact, even electrosensitive is a bit of a misnomer in my opinion, because all of biology is by default electrosensitive. Some are, I guess, electro hypersensitive and can feel it a lot. And for these people, do you have examples of people that are electro hypersensitive? They had a very hard time getting out of the home, or they get bothered easily by people who bring a cell phone in the home. They can feel it, or these type of people. And I'm kind of describing here because I think a lot of people in the audience don't think these people exist, or some people don't think it's real. Some people cannot be in Montreal like I am. They feel sick. They don't live in Montreal. They go up north towards Mont Tremblant, or there are a few communities that are even further away from cell antennas, for example, because they don't feel well in the city. So for these people, Brian, what kind of stories can you share about the results of sleeping in a shielded bedroom? Did it help them feel less sensitive over time because they can recover a little bit from this environment?
Yeah, it does. There's been many cases where we've had the room shielded and the person is finally able to sleep. And that's just a huge win in and of itself.
Oh, yeah.
And there's other people who like suspect that they're electrosensitive because they don't sleep well. They don't necessarily feel just like pain or like when they turn on their cell phone or their Wi-Fi router or whatever. These people, there's some people that are like that, but there's a lot of people who are measuring their sleep with like a Whoop strap or an Oura Ring, and they don't sleep well unless they're shielded. And when they're shielded, like there was one bodybuilder, Chris Gethin, who shared on his Instagram. You've done an interview with him. I've done an interview with him. I went to his house, did an EMF, like measurement and consult on his whole house. And then I was prototyping this portable tent that I was developing with Dr. Mercola at the time. And so I had it with me, and I was like, you can try this. And he's like, he's British, so he's got a British accent. And he says, he's a huge guy, he's a bodybuilder. Yeah. So he's like, I believe that I don't have a good British accent, so I'm not going to even try it. But he believed that he's very electrosensitive, and he tried it for 2 nights while we were in town. And he said, I normally get like 5 minutes of deep sleep, which is very abnormal, right? Yeah. And the first night he got 30 minutes of deep sleep. And he was like blown away just by that. And that's not that much. But the second night he got over an hour, which is a lot better. I mean, you're supposed to be getting about an hour and a half at least of deep sleep, sometimes 2 hours or more. But he was consistently getting like 5 to 10 minutes of deep sleep every night. And then immediately, boom, he got 30 minutes. And that had never hit. That was his highest score to that point until the next day when he slept in the shielded tent again. And so like sometimes you don't realize like how much it's affecting your recovery. Even athletes, you require deep sleep in order for your brain to reset and for your muscles to rebuild at night. And so like if you're not getting into that deep sleep or getting into REM, or your sleep is being disrupted by these various frequencies, then you're not going to have as nearly as good of a recovery, and you're not going to have the gains that you would otherwise have if you did have like a restful sleep with good deep and good REM sleep.
For sure. A lot of folks, and you brought this concept that I'll explain in a second to my attention to give you the credit for it. But you mentioned while we were creating the course or having so many discussions together, you said, most of the research is around EMFs and cancer, but that's a long-term disease. Why don't we talk about just, wellness? And if sleep is impacted just a little bit, the consequences are disastrous for long-term health and even for longevity. So the reality is just impacting 5% of your sleep quality could be detrimental. But in certain people, we see it's impacting, it's transforming proper sleep into horrible sleep quality when they are exposed to the outside environment that we have. And the fact that we've normalized that, oh yeah, this environment, 100 Wi-Fi's, 100 cell towers, perfectly normal because everyone is exposed, does not mean that it's normal for biology. And unfortunately, sleep researchers have not really caught up with the idea, although I did see one study talking about the fact that Wi-Fi modifies sleep architecture and brain waves, and the researchers at the end say, but it doesn't really matter, or it's not dangerous, or they kind of always downplay at the end in the conclusion because of the conclusions would be so they're so daunting. It's like, oh my God, what have we done? How can we go back from that, right? How can we turn off all the routers? Like, it doesn't make sense. So I think in sleep research, they're pretty much caught in this loop and starting to use more radio frequency instead in their labs and whatnot. But anyway, I want to dive into specifically, have you seen certain clients who shield their environment, namely their bedroom, and then get some sort of adverse reaction? That's something I heard from Klinghardt. That's something I heard from other environmental medicine doctors. But I wanted to verify with you because I guess that's a concern for certain people. Is it too much for my body to handle having this change of environment? And how can you ease into it?
That's a great question. So has it happened? Yes, it has. Does it have to happen? No, it doesn't have to happen.
Okay.
Basically, when your body is finally able to sleep and it sees the opportunity to, like, oh my gosh, I don't have this stressor anymore, but it's had all this toxic buildup over time because your liver and your gallbladder are gunked up, and you just have, like, but I've got this constant stress. When your body's constantly stressed, it's not going to prioritize detoxification. So once you relieve that stress, the body's like, oh my gosh, I have all this toxic buildup, I need to dump it out. And that's what causes a lot of these Herxheimer reactions with people, especially if they're really electrosensitive and their body's constantly in a high stress state. You're in a sympathetic high stress state where you're not able to digest food, you're not able to detox, you're not able to hardly relax. You just feel anxious all the time. And so these people often have digestive issues. They often have issues with just with their mood and going off on people, or seemingly like they're a different person than they were just 5 years ago.
Yeah. Because
they seem like they're grumpy all the time. Their family thinks that they went crazy. But it's because you're in this constant fight or flight state, and you're a wounded animal, literally. And so when you're healing from this, you really need to have some support on board so that your body can handle the toxins that might be released, especially if you've been in a really high stress state for a long, long time. So the people that do have reactions are exactly that, that archetype that I just described. And the people that are, like, more healthy, you've been working on detox, you've been working on doing these other things in your body to release toxins, and you're not stressed out all the time, or you've learned to, like, do some meditation or some kind of relaxation response, those people are a lot less likely to have any kind of reaction. So is it still a benefit to have a shielded space? Yes, but sometimes your body's going to be releasing something. So, like, one time when we had a reaction, I've talked about this many times with you before, we had a woman who was very electrosensitive. She purchased a canopy, and that's the other way that you can shield a bed space, is doing a silver-lined canopy system that's a sheer fabric that goes all the way around the bed, and then you have, like, a floor covering underneath the floor. So it creates a Faraday cage. It blocks all the signals. It's grounded. There's no electricity getting in. Well, she had installed this on her bed and didn't sleep very well the first night. Her body was kind of anxious, and then the second night she started sweating, and when she was sweating, there was black gunk that was coming out of her pores, like, all over her body. And she had previously had mold exposure. And so basically this was mold leaving her body. And she freaked out, wanted to return the canopy. She thought it was bad for her. And she was obviously having a detox reaction. And it was a good reaction, but she needed some support to deal with all the toxicity that had built up. So that's, like, one example of, like, how how like your body innately is trying to heal you all the time. It's not trying to do anything that's bad for you. It's trying to always do the most efficient, the best thing. And the way that our world is, when there is a toxicity, there is something that's causing stress on our system, the body has to shift to deal with that. And so sometimes it prioritizes something and causes an autoimmune reaction. So sometimes the body turns against the thyroid because of exposure to chlorine or fluoride or some kind of allergen that you have. And there's all sorts of ways that the body's constantly shifting. And our goal is to really just set up the environment so that you have the best chance of the body shifting in the right direction. And shielding your space is one way to do that. And we've actually had many women who have gotten off of thyroid medication after sleeping in a shielded space after just a few nights.
Yeah.
Their symptoms they were hypothyroid, and they started to experience symptoms of being hyperthyroid. And so they worked with their doctor to titrate back their medication, and eventually got off of it completely. We've had 3 women over the last 3 years who've had that happen. And it just shows you that there is some kind of autoimmune component to these frequencies and how they're impacting your nervous system and your immune system.
Yeah, and the risk factor for developing electrosensitivity in the first place is hypothyroidism, or just thyroid problems in general. In a few studies, you have a few researchers that say that, and I'm not surprised. And also, I have to say that also electrosensitivity is much more present in women than men. In most studies, that is the case, and we don't know exactly what are the mechanism, but it's just a fact that there's a lot of women that maybe women are more attuned to experiencing the symptoms and actually more in tune with what they feel. But we don't know, but a lot of these electro hypersensitive are women, unfortunately. So I want to end this discussion just talking about warnings or, warnings you might emit towards people who want to shield a room or hire someone to shield their room. Maybe some people after this interview will call Shielded Healing, Brian, can you shield my room? But the reality is we have a worldwide audience, so most people won't be able to even, call you up and have someone from your team come in the US because they are from another country. So how should they think about shielding a room, and what common mistakes do people make when thinking about this idea?
Well, one of the common mistakes, even with EMF professionals, is to it's this monkey see, monkey do mentality, where you have a meter and you measure something high, you see a tower, and that's where you're getting the highest reading from, and so you just try to block where that direction is coming from without paying attention to the thousands of towers that are around that you can't see, because really that's one frequency you're worried about. And yeah, it's a high level, but what we know from the EMF research that's out there is that sometimes the field strength isn't necessarily the most important thing. I do think it's very important, and we measure levels to get them down to something that's reasonable, that I consider to be reasonable. But there's a lot of field strengths of thousands of various frequencies that you can't detect with a regular broadband meter, like something like this that's got a little antenna in here, and you're getting this. This is very valuable for measuring things around the house, but when you're measuring with a broadband, it's measuring every single frequency between 50 megahertz and 8 gigahertz. And there could be thousands of frequencies in that range, and there could be one that's making the field strength go up half that amount, like the bulk of whatever you're measuring as far as field strength. But there's some frequencies that are just so intense that they don't have to, as long as if they're tuned to a certain frequency, it doesn't have to be that strong of a field strength to have a biological response in the body. It could be very small and still produce the same biological response. The fact of the matter is that we want to block out as many of those frequencies as possible and reduce them as much as possible, not just the one that's causing the biggest field strength. And so that's why you have to do full shielding all the way around, ceiling, walls, floors, and follow the grounding procedure that we would have for you. The way to do that would be to ground to a single point. And if you're going to use electricity in the room, you have to use the ground in the home. You can't go into a stake in the ground outside. And then there's other measurements that we take when we're on an assessment for ground current. Is it dirty? Is it not? Wiring errors in the walls. And a lot of the time that we spend on assessments is if we have a high magnetic field, milligauss reading above 0.5 or more in the house, then we likely either have a source from outside or a source from inside the house. Then we need to track down, is it from outside or is it from inside the house. If it's inside the house, we can work with an electrician to fix and problem solve what it is, because if everything's wired correctly, there shouldn't be any elevation of magnetic fields in a home unless it's coming from outside power lines or some kind of ground loop issue in the neighborhood. Usually has to do with how the cable companies grounded things, how, if the electrical lines are corroded in the neighborhood, that can be an issue too. There's just a whole lot of different moving parts in what needs to be done to mitigate the different exposures. And there's 6, basic exposures that we test for. Electric fields, magnetic fields, dirty electricity. Artificial light is a huge one. We don't want the light to flicker. We want it to be the proper spectrum at the proper time of day. And we don't want it to be too bright at the wrong time of day. Or we want it to be very bright at the right part of the day. So, nature's kind of our guide with those things. And then some of the other stressors are geopathic stress, that stress that comes up from the earth, measure for that as well. So there's multiple types of EMF that you're testing for, and there's not one meter that measures everything. So it's really, and all the solutions are also different, basically for each type of EMF, because they're a different frequency, they require a different solution, whether it's shielding, grounding, or actually blocking it in some other way. And there's different materials that work better for the different frequencies too. So it's not as easy as just putting aluminum foil over everything. People are always asking me that on forums and social media and everything, but it's, there's a lot of shielding materials. It really takes an assessment to figure out like a customized plan for your space. But we do have a lot of people who DIY it with our help as well.
Okay, yeah, that's great to hear. I know there are several solutions that we talked about in our course, and you talk about in the scope of your work, that are more portable for people that are renters rather than home owners. For example, just installing a canopy is way less of a long-term solution compared to painting the room. You cannot move out of your home with the room, so a canopy might be a solution. There's the Mercola Silvershield tent that is either a temporary situation or something for travel. Also, I'll link to that as well. And I wanted to just end on a note and see your thoughts about that. Every time someone asks me about a specific source of EMFs, like, oh, I am 1 kilometer from high voltage power lines, is that okay? And they send me that on an Instagram DM. And then my answer is almost always, it depends. Or I send them towards shielded healing. I send them towards building biology practitioners from all around the world. And I tell them, look, I wish it were that simple, but there are a lot of factors to consider, like what kind of voltage are in these power lines? And do you know that? And will I even know that because of all the different power lines in all the different countries? So the reality for one source of EMFs, which is power lines, it is, complicated just for that. And then you multiply that by all the sources. So what I find is, and I want you to comment on that and let me know if you agree with that, I find that a lot of people, when they look at EMFs, their perception of risk is very skewed or very inaccurate. They tend to kind of fear the towers, but they're not the Wi-Fi and these kind of things. Do you find that in your clients as well?
Yeah, there's a lot of small things that are emphasized. There's one client last year that was just so obsessed about like shielding their ATV, and so that's all they could think about. Like, I go on this 2 hours a day, but like the idea is that like, okay, in our course we talk about this. We talk about our 3D method, where we have a methodology of prioritizing things, and it's downtime, duration, and distance. So those are the areas that matter the most as far as prioritizing EMF. Downtime is where you eat, sleep, or detox. Duration is how long are you spending in that area, and then distance is how close is it to you. Because if you're closer to it, it's going to be a higher reading on the meter, especially when it has to do with magnetic fields. So those are kind of the things you have to consider when you're prioritizing. Like, does the blender produce a magnetic field? Yes, but it's only for like 10, 20 seconds every morning, and you can press the button and walk away. Does the microwave produce something? Yes, but if you're going to use a microwave, which we don't even have a microwave, so I don't recommend them for various reasons, because of the EMF, but also because of how it, there's controversy over whether it depletes nutrients in food and that sort of thing. Yeah. But like, if you press it and you walk away out of the house or whatever, like, is that the biggest thing you need to worry about when there is a cell phone tower like a block away, or you're sleeping with your phone off of airplane mode at night, or your Wi-Fi router's in your bedroom? Like there's a lot of things to consider. And so if you do this, I'd recommend anyone watching this to actually take the electric pollution fix course that Nick and I created, because we go through everything, checklists, priorities, all of those things, and help you to start to, just get through that punch list of like, what do I need to do to optimize my house from EMF, and it helps you to prioritize things.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks for the push and the ad here. I wasn't planning on talking about the course so much, but it's true that we spent, kind of an entire year going back and forth and then recording and doing the beta and then doing another version. It looks like we've been working on this course for 4 years. So yeah, we did put a lot of info there. But what my takeaway is, in many situations, if you're unsure if a particular tower is a problem, if power lines are a problem, am I too close to this or that, or what is the safe distance from this, from that? It comes down to a survey, having someone with meters and expertise to look and quantify your environment. Even for myself, I've steered away from consumer meters. I don't use them very often. I know what my environment is like. It's not good. I'm in Montreal. I don't look at many. Even when I travel nowadays, I don't really use a meter because I'm stuck in the room anyway. I won't change hotel rooms, and I'm able to handle it also. I have to mention, to be respectful to electrosensitives, I am able to handle a slightly more polluted environment for a few days, and then I go back home and I know there's no Wi-Fi, and there's no Wi-Fi on my computer. There's no Wi-Fi in my living room, so I avoid all these sources all the time. But all that to say that in many situations, including shielding, I have to stress the importance as a concluding remark to hire a professional, whether it's Brian's team or a building biologist, or internationally speaking, there's also GeoVital. There's many good organizations. You have to find someone with experience and expertise and put your trust in someone that actually knows what they're doing. They have a good track record and you feel confident towards that person. So it is important. It is an investment, but it is very important. Brian, is there anything else you wanted to mention towards that pertains to electrosensitivity that maybe we forgot to talk about, or something you want to stress, or a concluding remark you wanted to leave listeners with?
Yeah, well, I think, the last thing that you mentioned was about like worrying about power lines versus Wi-Fi. One of the questions that often comes up from people who are electrosensitive, or even people who are just curious, is which type of EMF is the worst?
Yeah.
And, it's really like whichever one your body is most sensitive to. That's the answer. But really, there's a book by Dr. Robert O. Becker called Cross Currents. And in that book, he talks about how it doesn't matter what type of EMF exposure you have. If it's a magnetic field, an electric field, or a radio frequency, pretty much all of them are modulated at 50 or 60 hertz. And what we know from the work on the voltage gated calcium ion channels is that no matter what type of frequency it is, if it's 60 hertz, it actually does have a biological effect on your body, a detrimental effect. So if it's a radio frequency, it's modulated at 60 hertz because it's running off of a signal that's off of 60 hertz power. And so it's got the 60 hertz sine wave in the higher frequency radio frequency. And the magnetic field, the same thing, electric field, the same thing. So the mechanism is the same, no matter what pulsating frequency it is, man-made frequency it is, the mechanism of action is the same and how it causes damage. And so which EMF is the worst? It's whichever ones you're exposed to. So you need to try to reduce your overall load and get that down so that, I always talk about this scale where you have this scale of healing. When the scale's tipped in this direction, your body's healing. When it's tipped in this direction, healing is halted. You're not healing. You might be getting actually worse. And a lot of times, on each of these sides, you have things that you're doing to benefit your body on this side. And then these are things that are stressing your body on this side. So you have toxins, you have EMF, you have toxic relationships, like different things over here that are stressing your body. And over here, you have like your nutrient-dense whole food, your sunlight, your sauna therapy, your cold therapy, your nutrients, supplements, everything that's good. Your kids, loving relationships. And it's this constant battle our whole lives where we're trying to tip the direction of this scale into the direction of healing. Sometimes you have so much on this stress side that no matter what you do over here, you can't tip that scale because there's way too much weight over here. So we need to have this detox lifestyle where we're removing EMF from our life and we're also removing toxins from our life. We need to be eating biodynamic food. That's going to take some weight off of this side of the scale. We need to shield our bedrooms. Boom, that's going to tip the scale again in that healing direction. But we need to start, doing coffee enemas and helping our gallbladders to release bile because we have so many toxins in our bodies because of the environment that we live in. So how can we remove the stressors and strengthen the defenses and nourish the body with food and sun and grounding energy from the earth so that we can actually rebuild and live a successful and fulfilling life? That's the basics of healing right there. Any health topic you've ever talked about, it can be boiled down into this scale right here. Is it something that's good for your body, or is it something that's stressing the body? With the basics of it is remove the stressors, add more nourishment, tip that scale in the right direction.
Bingo. I don't need to add a word, really. This is exactly what Dr. Cruz has talked about if you also listen to this 2024 Summit interview. Brian, thank you so much. And how can people work with you, find you? What websites do you want to communicate with the audience?
Sure. Yeah, you guys can find us at shieldedhealing.com. That's our services website. And then we also just launched a new product company where we're designing all kinds of new EMF shielded products called the Shielding Shop. So you can go to theshieldingshop.com and shop around. We've got shielded lamps, shielded power cords, shielded, we're trying to redo every single thing that's causing problems from our assessments and create solutions so people can replace them once and for all, and then forget about EMF as a problem in their homes.
Tremendous. So again, helping them remove those stressors from the stress bucket to help tip the scale. Brian, Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure as always.